Imagine walking through your town one morning and seeing a woman dancing alone in the street. No music, no celebration, no festival, just dancing. At first, nobody paid much attention. People assumed she was drunk, or perhaps mentally unwell. But when night fell, she was still dancing. When the sun rose the next morning, she was still dancing. 3 days later, she was still dancing. Then something impossible happened. Other people started dancing too. 1 became 10. 10 became 50. 50 became hundreds soon. Entire streets were filled with people dancing uncontrollably. Some laughed, some cried, some screamed in pain, some collapsed from exhaustion, and according to historical records, some danced until they died. More than 500 years later, nobody knows exactly why it happened. The Archivist files. This is case file number 4, the dancing plague of 1518. Act 1, the woman who wouldn't stop. July 1518. The city of Strasbourg, a busy trading city surrounded by stone walls. Merchants filled the markets. Craftsmen worked long hours. Church bells echoed through narrow streets. But beneath the surface, life was becoming increasingly difficult. Food shortages were common. Disease was never far away. Many families struggled to survive. Fear had become part of everyday life. Then one morning, everything changed. A woman named Frau Trophia walked into the street. Without warning, she began to dance. Not gracefully, not joyfully. Witnesses described something closer to frantic movement. Almost desperate. Hours passed. She continued. The sun moved across the sky. She continued. The marketplace closed. She continued. The city went to sleep. She continued. Imagine looking out your window at midnight and seeing the same woman still moving. Imagine waking up the next morning and realizing she never stopped by now. The entire city was talking about her. And then came a disturbing realization. She wasn't choosing to dance. She couldn't stop. Most people expected exhaustion to end the ordeal. Instead, the situation became far more frightening. Act 2, the outbreak within days. Others began dancing too. Nobody invited them. Nobody taught them. Nobody understood why. Yet more and more people joined. A baker, a laborer, a merchant, a young woman, an elderly man. The numbers kept growing, 10, 20, 50. 100 soon. Entire sections of Strasbourg were affected. Witnesses described scenes that bordered on the unbelievable. People danced under the scorching summer sun. People danced through rain. People danced until their shoes wore through. Some reportedly danced barefoot after their footwear disintegrated. Others collapsed, only to stand up and continue. Imagine your legs burning from exhaustion. Imagine every muscle screaming for rest. Imagine desperately wanting to stop and being unable to. That is what witnesses claimed they were seeing. Some dancers reportedly cried while moving. Others begged for help. Some prayed. Some screamed, yet their bodies refused to obey. But then a new question emerged. Why wasn't everyone affected? Why these people? Why now? And why Strasbourg? Nobody had answers. The city was terrified. Unfortunately, the solution they chose would only make matters worse. Act 3, the cure that turned deadly as panic spread. City officials searched for explanations. Doctors examined the dancers. Religious leaders debated possible causes. Citizens whispered about curses. Some believed divine punishment had descended upon the city. Others feared an unknown disease. Everyone wanted answers. Nobody had any. Then local physicians proposed a theory. The dancers suffered from overheated blood, and according to the medical beliefs of the time, the cure was simple: let them dance. The illness would eventually leave the body on its own. So authorities took action. Wooden stages were built. Musicians were hired. Drummers were recruited. Professional dancers were brought in. The city essentially created a system designed to help the dancers continue. Think about that. People were collapsing from exhaustion, and the official solution was more dancing. Music echoed through public squares. Crowds gathered to watch. The epidemic continued to spread. For a brief moment, the streets of Strasbourg transformed into something surreal. A city trapped in a dance it couldn't stop. Then the deaths began. Act 4, when dancing became deadly. The human body is remarkably resilient. But it has limits. The dancers were rapidly approaching them. Days of constant movement took a terrible toll. Bodies became dehydrated. Muscles failed. Feet split open. Hearts struggled under relentless strain. Witnesses reported dancers collapsing in the streets. Some never got up again. Historical accounts suggest dozens may have died. Perhaps more. Heat stroke, exhaustion, heart failure. No one knows exactly how many lives were lost. But one thing was clear. This was no longer a strange curiosity. It was a public disaster. Fear spread throughout Strasbourg. Families locked their doors. Citizens avoided crowded streets. People watched neighbors collapse and wondered, would they be next then? Almost as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The dancers disappeared. The music ended. The epidemic vanished. But the mystery was only beginning. 5. The bread theory. For centuries, people searched for an explanation. Eventually, one theory emerged as the leading suspect: bread. Not ordinary bread. Poisoned bread. At first, the idea sounds ridiculous. How could bread make people dance? The answer lies in a fungus called ergot. Ergot grows on rye grain. And during the Middle Ages, rye was a staple food. When consumed, ergot can produce powerful hallucinations, convulsions, confusion, paranoia, and in severe cases, behavior so bizarre that it appears almost supernatural. For years, many researchers believed they had solved the mystery. The people of Strasbourg weren't cursed. They weren't possessed. They were poisoned. The theory seemed convincing, until historians looked closer. There was one major problem. Actually, several. Ergot poisoning affects the entire body. Victims often suffer intense pain, severe muscle spasms, loss of coordination. Many become too weak to stand. Yet the dancers of Strasbourg reportedly remained active for days, sometimes weeks, constantly moving, constantly dancing. Could poisoned grain really explain that? Many modern experts don't think so. And as researchers dug deeper, the bread theory began to crumble. If it wasn't poison, then what could force hundreds of healthy people to dance? The next theory is even stranger. Act 6, the disease of fear. Imagine living in Strasbourg in 1518. Food is scarce. Disease is everywhere. Death is common. The future feels uncertain. Now imagine hearing rumors that people are dancing uncontrollably. Then imagine seeing it yourself. Your neighbor, your friend, a stranger in the marketplace. What would that do to your mind today? Psychologists know that extreme stress can produce extraordinary behavior. Entire schools have experienced mass fainting events. Entire communities have reported identical symptoms. Groups of people have become sick, without any physical disease being present. This phenomenon is known as mass psychogenic illness, or more commonly, mass hysteria. According to this theory, the dancers weren't poisoned. They were overwhelmed. Years of stress, fear, famine, disease, religious anxiety, all exploding at once. The dancing became contagious. Not physically, psychologically. One frightened person influenced another, then another, until an entire community became trapped inside the same nightmare. Many historians believe this is the most likely explanation. But even this theory leaves questions unanswered, because there is something else about Strasbourg that makes this case far more unsettling. To understand it, you need to understand what people believed in 1518. Act 7, The Curse of St. Vitus. Today, most people explain strange events through science. The people of Strasbourg lived in a very different world. A world of miracles, saints, demons, divine punishment, and one belief terrified them more than most: the curse of St. Vitus. According to local tradition, St. Vitus could punish sinners. One of those punishments was said to be uncontrollable dancing. Imagine truly believing that. Imagine hearing stories your entire life. Stories about people cursed to dance until collapse. Then one day, you see it happening with your own eyes. Would fear make the epidemic spread? Could belief itself become contagious? Some historians think so. The more people believed the curse was real, the more terrifying the situation became. And fear has always had a strange power over human beings. But once again, the evidence is incomplete. There are no recordings, no medical reports, no surviving interviews. Only fragments, only clues, only questions. And that's where the biggest mystery of all begins. Because historians aren't even sure how many people were affected. Act 8, The Missing Evidence. One of the strangest parts of this case is how little we actually know. The event happened more than 500 years ago. Most records have been lost. Others contradict each other. Some accounts describe dozens of dancers. Others describe hundreds. Some mention deaths. Others don't. The deeper historians investigate, the less certain everything becomes. Think about that. One of history's most famous mysteries may be built on incomplete evidence. Some details may have been exaggerated. Others may have been forgotten entirely. It's possible that parts of the story have changed over centuries of retelling. And yet, one fact remains remarkably consistent. Something unusual happened in Strasbourg. Something strange enough that people continued discussing it for generations. Which brings us to the final question. What do historians actually believe today? Act 9. What historians believe. Most modern historians agree on one thing. The dancing plague was real. Not necessarily every detail. Not necessarily every number. But the event itself. The strongest explanation today combines several factors. Extreme stress, food shortages, disease, religious fear, and a society already pushed to its limits. In other words, the people of Strasbourg may have been living under so much pressure that their minds found an extraordinary way to respond. Not through violence, not through rebellion, but through movement. Relentless movement. An epidemic born from fear itself. It's a fascinating theory. Perhaps even the best theory. But it isn't proof. And that's what keeps this mystery alive. Because no matter how convincing the explanations become, nobody can say with certainty what happened in the summer of 1518. Act 10, the final question. One woman stepped into the street and started dancing. Then others joined. Then hundreds. Some collapsed. Some may have died. And eventually, the epidemic vanished. No cure. No clear answer. No definitive explanation. Only theories. More than 500 years later, we still don't know exactly why it happened. Was it poisoned grain? Mass hysteria? Religious terror? Or something we still don't fully understand? Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is this. The people of Strasbourg weren't fundamentally different from us. They were ordinary people, just like us, which raises one final question. If the conditions were right, could something like this happen again? 500 years later, the music is gone, the dancers are gone, The city has changed, but the mystery remains.
In the street.
One woman
No
danced,
music, no
then
celebration,
dozens,
no festival,
then hundreds,
just dancing.
and for a brief moment in history, the entire town moved to a rhythm nobody could hear. Case file number 4 closed.